It's my privilege to next introduce Dr. John Perkins. We got to hear from him this morning as a staff, and it's wonderful to have him here all the way from Mississippi. Thank you, Dr. Perkins. First and foremost, Dr. Perkins wanted to know that he is someone who enjoys and cherishes his family. He's been married to Vera May, his beloved wife, for over 60 years. Dr. Perkins has 8 children. He has 13 grandchildren, 4 great-grandchildren, and he's had over 50 years of service in the Christian ministry, for which we're so thankful. He's been instrumental in starting important movements called the Christian Community Development Association, Christian Community Health Fellowship, which Esperanza is a part of. And most importantly for Esperanza, Carolyn Klaus tells a story in her book, and she's told us this personally as well, that when she was considering starting Esperanza back in the mid-'80s, she was at a CCHF conference, and she said, Dr. Perkins, she were having a conversation, and Dr. Perkins said to her, Carolyn, I think God's calling you to start a health center. And so, it's not quite as simple as that, but she did. And we have your exhortation. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Of course, to the mayor and the councilman and all other friends. Being here today is really part of a fulfillment of a 50-year journey. When I went back from California to my home state in Mississippi, I was able to see somewhat of the problem in our society, both urban and rural. What was happening to the breakdown of the family and also the breakdown of the neighborhood and community. The best people were leaving, migrating out, and we was not raising up indigenous people in those neighborhoods to serve the people in that community. And that we got a vision. You got to know the problem, otherwise you're going to use all your resources to fix the symptom. And that we need to get at the very root of the problem if we're going to really solve the problem. And that we was able to see what we had to do there. And we sort of put that in the shape of what we call the 3 R's of Christian community development that became the foundation for this national movement that is taking place throughout the United States. And it's happening fast right now in our society. We could see it there. We call it the 3 R's. The first thing we had to do, you had to come up with the philosophy of ministry that solves the problem, that builds on and around the problem, and not using all of your time with other things. You got to focus. You got to do one thing. You got to be the Wilberforce. You got to deal with the issue, and you got to give your life to that, and you can't solve it in one day, you know. And so we saw the problem, and we said we're going to fix it. What we got to do is talk about relocation. We got to talk about getting these young folks to stay in school, go off to college, love them, and then bring some of them back to the neighborhood. That was called relocation. That's what's happening here in this community. We are dealing with a problem. People do good or bad in neighborhood. We know where the death and the crime is going to happen tonight. It's going to happen in that neighborhood where the strength is weak and where the people don't have the wherewithal and the family intact to solve the problem. And so relocation began to do that. We wasn't just talking about bringing white folks back into the community. We was talking about first bringing the kids themselves back so they could be indigenous leaders and build some economic social base and have some ownership in that neighborhood. And then we were going to do the second R, that's reconciliation. We were going to recognize that all people are created in the image of God, and the very purpose of the gospel was to reconcile people across racial, social, and economic barriers and get rid of this bigotry and tribalism and racism. There's nothing but a waste and death. And so we put reconciliation. God was in Christ, reconciling the world unto himself, and has given us that ministry of reconciliation. Then we got to recognize the fact that justice is a stewardship issue. Justice is an economic issue. It's not a social issue. Social issue is an outcome of us not being good stewards and managing God's resources. The earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof. And he gives us the great privilege of being a steward of his resources in the world. So we begin to talk about that. And we begin to talk then about that whole idea of redistribution. And that was a challenge because to talk about redistribution was to be a communist or a socialist. And we was killing them. And so you couldn't talk about that. And so we had created a wonderful capitalistic system, but we had allowed greed to take it over. It about got it now because it couldn't hear the voice. We couldn't challenge it at all. If you try to challenge the greed within capitalism, they're going to isolate you in society. But we confronted it. And you guys are suffering from it now. You're suffering from it. You say, do we need religion? We need to speak to our system. And the people that run it have isolated themselves so they can't hear nobody's voice but their own selfish voice in society. And so we came up with that idea. Then as we began to work then in that community, we began to see that we did not have the people there. And that's when we came up with the Christian Health Fellowship. If we were going to get people out in these rural areas and these needed areas, they wasn't there now because we were moving more to prosperity and greed. And so we had to raise up Christian people who had a commitment that's just deeper than money, but a commitment to the human life of the people in the community. And we had to produce them. We wasn't waiting for them. And that's why we created the association, to get doctors. And that's why we got Randall. That's why we got these other doctors. We went out into the community and spent years doing it. And then we created what we call the Christian Community Development Association. And all of those work together. And we see that at work. We heard that here today. Indigenous people from this neighborhood is raising up service to serve the people in this neighborhood. This is a bright day. This is a bright day. And we welcome all of you folks to join with us, all the Christians. We're Christians. I know somebody's going to say, why not Muslim? When they always say that to me, I say, the Muslim has been doing a better job. Give us Christians a chance to do something. We're not neglecting anybody. We got more churches, we got more people, and we're doing less. Let's challenge the Christian to catch up with the Muslims and the other group. And I tell them, just wait a minute, we'll get to you. We'll get strong enough to get you someday. So we're not neglecting anybody, but we're trying to play catch up. This is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day.